It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Faruk Gulban. You've heard Faruk's name come up many times, both yesterday and today. He's one of the lead developers of the LAMI package, an expert both on acquisition of high resolution and analysis. We're very happy to have him here from Maastricht. Faruk, thanks so much. Looking forward to your lecture.
Thank you, John. How is my sound? Voice? Good? Okay. So I think it could not be in a better preparation for my talk than Daniel's talk. So I'm going to talk about partial brain methods and quality control. So first, I've been told that it might be useful to have this. So I am currently working as a researcher and a software engineer at Brainovation in the Netherlands, the company that produces Brain Voyager, you might know it. I'm also affiliated with the Cognitive Neuroscience Department of Maastricht University. I currently work on mesoscopic cortical landscape analysis, and the recent paper is available there. And I work together with Renzo to develop LANI. I have some other software as well to do segmentation and related high resolution data analysis stuff. Thank you, Tyler. And since last year, I disseminate my expertise through YouTube to teach people. I find it quite efficient, actually, because I don't need to sit in meetings for 2 hours, like 10 times, just talking about the same stuff. And I would like to really highlight at the beginning, not at the end, my collaborators. And Dimo Ivanov, I really work with him in the scanner room, one of the best MRI physicists, I think, in the high field. And Kendrick Kay for analysis, and Rainer Goebel, my boss, who is one of the really deep experts on anything that has to do with MRI data analysis. Renzo, we actually collaborate more on analysis than acquisition. Maybe this will change. And Saskia, one of the best persons to discuss and elaborate and think about things. Okay, motivation and goals. So we want to do layer fMRI here. And for doing layer fMRI, as we saw yesterday, we need to deal with partial volume or partial brain coverage data because we can accelerate more and so forth. We talked about that. And unluckily for us, when we do layer fMRI, we need to be much more precise and accurate than usual because we are looking at much more fine detailed structures in the brain. So, and then just to clarify, I'm not going to do Amazon review of software packages that I find uninteresting and also not necessary right now because we are at the cutting edge. We are not sure what is the best practice at all. Maybe there's an algorithm to be discovered, that will become the best practice. Therefore, I would strongly say that we should not be attached to the past too much. Oh, I know FreeSurfer works for the last 10 years, 20 years. Therefore, let me go to 3 Tesla and get my 1 millimeter or whatever, 0.7 millimeter T1 weighted scans there so that FreeSurfer can work, so that I can analyze my cutting edge data. I find this train of reasoning a bit misguided. Okay, then in this talk, I'm going to talk about the partial brain segmentation starting from the first principles. So I know that most of you will not become a methods developer, but I think we are at the point of time where we need to understand things deeply so that we establish the path to the future. And I have to say that in Daniel's talk, I took 2 things personally. One was about taxpayer money and other one was something about SPM. I will come back to those points. Okay, so what is partial brain? Let's define it first. I will go a bit slower at the beginning and speed up later. For sure that you are familiar with some data that looks like this in your mind's eye. You have the brain, you have a little box that you position around. You get visual cortex, motor cortex, and so forth. Maybe brainstem. Maybe you do weird stuff. For those of you who did 3D Grace, actually, this should be more or less familiar because 3D Grace from David Feinberg, a beautiful sequence. It had a very small field of view. Okay, but then I would also consider the coil type dependent effects on the image as partial brain as well. For instance, here, and some of you might recognize which coil is this one. This is from actually CMRR, a surface coil that has this hole in the middle and very high sensitivity around the edges. So I would consider this surface coil data as partial brain image as well, because, well, the middle part is missing, right? Maybe some of you did or planning to do controlled ghosting to increase your resolution. Maybe you are just interested in the Kalkarin sulcus and you want to squeeze your field of view so that you can accelerate more or whatever, and you are fine with having these reps there. So this I would consider partial brain as well. Of course, lesions, one part of the brain is missing due to natural causes or surgery. Maybe you do post-mortem preparations and going like really high resolution, and I know people here like to do this type of stuff a lot. You just carve out a chunk of the brain and just scan that one, right? I would consider partial brain as well. All sorts of other combinations. You have surface coil, you have controlled ghosting, you mix and match. And finally, I would also consider exotic brains. For instance, this is a dolphin brain as a partial human brain, maybe. So basically what I'm trying to get that if we focus on this partial brain segmentation problem, I think we are up to, like we are set for discovering some new ground and some more, maybe more general ways of dealing with this edge case challenging data. Okay, now let's move to the issues. And as I'm lucky that people here actually do care about these details. When you do segmentations, oftentimes blood vessels are included, sulcus sometimes not delineated well so that it's like stick together. I mean, if you worked on the segmentation, if you did look at your data, you saw these things. Then dura mater, as mentioned by Saskia and Daniel today and yesterday. And I would say due to acquisition artifacts, there are segmentation errors as well. You can have phase artifacts, other stuff that kind of is not biological signals, but kind of like they distort and cloud your gray matter and white matter and so forth. And on the right side, actually, this is from one of my papers. I will not tell you which software is used to get these segmentations, and you don't need to care about the red and blue. Just think that red and blue together is the segmentation given automatically. And you might see that for sure, so you need to get rid of some arteries there. You need to open this sulcus. And you need to work on here. Okay, I will come back to that. Maybe some of you recognize that tissue, some of you didn't. So now I'm setting the like the stage now. So you want to analyze partial brain images, want to do fancy layer fMRI, write your next Science or Nature paper. Researcher runs popular programs that he is assured that works. You just need to tweak some parameters, you know, but they work. Then researchers arrives at a forking path. You look at the results and you say, huh, it looks good. Let's go ahead and do layers. Or you really look at them in detail. You say, hey, like maybe this sulcus is not correctly delineated. This artery is there. And of course, if I'm going to compute layers, it wouldn't make so much sense to have an artery sitting on top of my gray matter considered as the superficial layer, right? That would be kind of weird thing to do. If you do that, you will suffer because none of the... Oh. Test. Okay. So in that case, you will suffer because many of the tools that we can use, or at least the ones we can use without having an access to a whole bunch of people that develop the software in our own institute, will suffer because we don't know how to maybe tweak the parameters and so forth. Okay, I think you get the point. So now, quiz time. And yeah, I did this before. And so yeah, what do you see in the image below? First of all, which contrast is this? Bonus points if someone can recognize. So this is actually a T1 weighted image, but done in the style of Pierre-François van der Moertele, or Van der Moertel, I think I should say, who actually sadly passed away recently. This is a T1 weighted MP range divided by proton density weighted image that is actually gets rid of the bias field quite nicely. However, what pops out to you in this image? For instance, let's zoom into this temporal part. What do you see here? What is the prevalent structure that like, pops to your eye? Okay, I will not expect for answers, but I tell you already. Oh, there is someone who wants to enter the room. I admit. So this white stuff, white stick, right? What is that white stick? Do you have any idea? Saskia knows, of course. That. Well, luckily not. That's an artery, a very large artery that is like more than a millimeter in diameter. That is sitting on top of your temple, like superior temporal cortex. And like I find it really strange that people do brain imaging. I mean, it's not just you. Maybe some of you do recognize and didn't tell, but they don't recognize these structures. I find it absolutely unbelievable. Like, how can you not know about the big arteries and big veins around the brain? You do segmentations and layer fMRI especially, but then you like don't have any idea that they might be sitting there. And what is that thing, that white thing on the right, and you see on the top as well? Yes, dura mater, exactly. And not enough people talk about these things. So, okay, in the next image, what do you see? What is the prominent feature? If you are doing visual neuroimaging, you must know what I'm trying to tell you here. You must. Yes, the sinus. The sinus is there. And what is the problem for image segmentation? Well, it looks exactly like gray matter, right? It looks very gray as the gray matter. And you can tell it is a sinus because you have this anatomical prior in your mind's eye, or if you did like medical studies, you must study these structures. You know that it is somewhere there, somewhere a bit on the left, sometimes a bit on the right. It varies people to people. Okay, the next quiz, the last one. What do you see in the image below? And this should be harder to answer. And by the way, like maybe just a little bit of description. This is a T2 star weighted image. On the left side, I did a like intensity projection, so basically anisotropic voxels, think of it. And on the right side, in the same slice, a bit more zoomed in, I am just continuously sliding back and forth. And the voxel resolution is 0.25 millimeter isotropic. What do you see? What pops out to your eye? Maybe let's have a look at this bright spot first. Does it look familiar? Very bright, a lot of signal. Maybe it's an artery, right? Maybe. What about this guy? This very dark hole, very large. What can it be? Well, it's not very bright, right? Maybe it's not artery, but what is it? Sinus, yes, vein, exactly. Now let's have a look at here. Look what's happening there. That's a true plane artery that is surrounded by two branches of veins that are like snaking around it, like a highway, right? You see it? Okay, now let's have a look at the gray matter. So this is a sulcus, for those of you who couldn't recognize. So this part should be gray matter. Like, what do you see there? Those little worms, huh? Diving into the gray matter, right? What are those things in a T2 star weighted image? Veins, right? Mesoscopic veins, let's say. Okay, so I think like one funny thing is it's actually quite surprising that these things are not immediate in people's mind's eye, and we are trying to do like high-res imaging layer fMRI, and they are very important structures that we need to be aware of. Okay. So, statement. Segmentation starts and ends with quality control. And I guess you would even say like science starts and ends with quality control. You need to check what you are doing many times, double check, triple check, right? So if the outcome doesn't work, you can try to do better pre-processing. You can try to do augmentation and better segmentation, tweak some parameters. And you do quality control again, then maybe you repeat this process. So this can be a recursive process. This can go, very deep. And of course, there's a point that you know where you need to stop. For instance, on the right-hand side, you run some program. You get this following automatic whole brain segmentation output. Does it look good to you? Would you say this is a good segmentation? Well, maybe, like overall it looks good. White matter is white matter, kind of, gray matter is gray matter. Now let's have a look at the details. Let's have a look at here. Let's zoom there. Like, what's that? Is the blue part look natural to you, like the way it is segmented? Maybe it like goes into the sulcus too much here, but not too much there. Now let's have a look at here. like, what is this green island? And then this very blue thing, can cortical thickness be so thick? Okay, and we look at here, you should recognize this structure, visual neuroimaging people, the sinus, right? But what's happening there? Like, what is that missing little chunk of gray matter? Yeah, we avoided the sinus, fine. But maybe not there, we should like add more, right? Otherwise our superficial layers will be in the middle of the cortex. Okay, so now the statement comes, and I saw this on Twitter recently. Someone said, so much of math education is teaching traffic rules to people who never seen cars. I agree with that. But one would say that so much of MRI segmentation is people driving cars without knowing the traffic rules. I think that's true as well. Therefore, let's go to the principles to learn the traffic rules. So one point, and this goes back to the a bit taxpayer money comment. Do you know this person? Oh, wait. Was I not showing the highest? Who is this person? Oh, it's written there, right? Cajal, yeah. I hope you know Cajal, right? The founding father of our field, neuroscience, basically. And I'm not going to read this part, you can read it later, but basically what he says as an anecdote is that when he was working on the microscope and studying the structure of the neurons, he was saying that if I would have drawn what I saw at that moment, I would have never reached to my conclusion. That is, neurons are actually separated. There is the synaptic cleft, right? But what his strategy was, like looking at the images day in, day out, and then reasoning in your brain in space, like how the structures should be. Keep tracking what's going on. So not only like over focusing on 2D images that he was seeing at that moment. And yeah, like, I mean, he did a lot of manual work, right? All his like life's work was manual work, staining stuff, looking at the microscope, drawing. That's how he got the Nobel Prize. Do you think he wasted the taxpayer money by doing that? I am not sure. Okay, now let's go to the special reasoning for MRI context in 3D images. So first of all, these are some like names that I tried to make up with regards to the like the most common problems that I encounter, because quite a few people actually come to me and ask like, hey, I have segmentation problems, Laney doesn't work, you know, then I ask for their input file and I see all of a sudden like a gray matter with like 0.5 millimeter thickness, then of course like there are no layers and so forth. And okay, now the point is there are these main problems with segmentation, doing segmentation, quality controlling the segmentation. First is Plato's cave problem. Well, we are looking at the 3D image through a screen, right? A 2D medium. And we are slicing the brain in 3 cardinal axes. These axes are probably not optimal axes to see and understand the brain. And therefore, and also in our papers, we just publish 2D figures, right? But this really doesn't convey the complexity and the comprehension you need for a truly one more dimensional space, 3D space. And this goes back to Cajal's comment, and that is, you need to be in this 3D space and you need to reason while looking at 2D projections or shadows of it. That's why I call it Plato's cave problem. So escape from the cave and come to the real 3D world, I would say. The apparent thickness problem. It's actually funny, like in conferences and so forth, sometimes you show segmentation examples and people come, very like important people, right? And they say, whoa, this is wrong. Cortical thickness cannot be this much. This is like 10 millimeters of cortical thickness. How can it be? Your segmentation is wrong. No, this is about the Plato's cave problem. Like we are just looking at a slice that cuts the brain in such an angle that the apparent thickness of this blue stuff, cortical gray matter, seems to be like 11 millimeters, 15 millimeters, whatever. But this is just because you couldn't escape the Plato's cave. You are looking at the shadow. It is not 11 millimeters. If you measure it with the right tools, you will see that it is around 2 to 3 millimeters. And the island problem, and that's when people say, hey, your segmentation is wrong. I think you did a bad job. And I'm not saying these are good segmentations, by the way. These are just some examples. Because I am seeing in your figure a little island that is not connected to any white matter. How can it be? All the gray matter is connected to a white matter. I mean, maybe this is too simple, but this comes from my personal experience. You know, like people, I actually don't understand how people cannot understand this. but I think it's about like reasoning in 3D. Well, there is an island, it looks like it, but there is white matter somewhere in the depth. You are not just seeing it in 3D. I am sure if any of you are medical doctors, you must be like very well trained in reasoning like this, you know, to do brain surgery and so forth. Okay, this is one of the principles. The second one, the boundary uncertainty, the most common misconception or error of thinking. So, okay, let's think of something different. Let's think of the clouds. You know, everyone knows a cloud. I can show you a picture and say, hey, draw, like segment the clouds, right? Easy, you just draw lines around them. So now let's move 6 billion kilometers from the clouds. And I ask you, hey, segment the clouds. Well, there's no clouds there, right? All the clouds are condensed into a single pixel. Now let's zoom in like crazy to the atomic level. And this is a water molecule, I believe. Where is the cloud? Can you draw the line? Where is the true segmentation that separates the cloud from the rest of the things in the air? Well, you don't see it. The point is, and that's a very deep point, and by the way, for those of you who like authority, like this guy, Köndering, 1990s, this article is the 5th most cited computer science article of all time. He talks about, specifically about this issue that he calls the scale space problem. And he says that actually when we talk about even simple measurements like density, like you can say, oh, cloud is whatever, certain amount of water molecules in the air, like density, right? But actually what you mean there is that that density only works for a certain volume that you are measuring. Like the volume that you measure, the density comes as a function of that. Because if your volume is too little, you will either have a water molecule there or no water molecule. There's no in between. So there's no cloud. The concept doesn't exist. So how does it relate to MRI? Well, T1 weighted contrast is a bit like this as well. If we zoom in too much or zoom out too much, and if those of you who looked at the histology images that are at micron resolution, they find it very hard actually to find the white matter gray matter boundary. It is all zigzaggy, like you need to be very detailed. Sometimes you just draw a smooth line. Why? Because this concept is not like a true concept that we approach as we increase our precision. No. It's like tissue segmentation, these objects that we are talking, they exist in a limited range of scales. Therefore, and I will come back to this point a bit more in detail tomorrow, but just the precision of a measurement doesn't make it valuable by itself. Like just increasing the precision doesn't mean that you come close to the ground truth or anything, because things behave weirdly across spatial scales. So now just one example, think of a coast and try to segment the coastline, okay? Well, you just draw a line here, you know, you say it's 1 kilometer, whatever. Now you zoom in and think that this is a wave and draw the coastline considering this wave. Like, well, do you draw the coastline here? Maybe there? Like, there is always some inherent uncertainty in the boundaries that we draw. We are trying to make sense of the world, right? We are trying to project categorization into really like a continuous thing. And of course, there is some uncertainty with the boundaries, and it will always be there. And yeah, I made this point before, but yeah, just by increasing the precision of a measurement, like zooming into a coastline, doesn't make your measurements all of a sudden more useful or easier to do or more certain. Sometimes when you zoom in too much, you might actually increase uncertainty in certain ways. Okay, we need to think of these when we are talking about segmentations. Now, let's go to partial voluming, and this will be quick. Well, I hope the example is kind of clear by itself. You have some nice image, you put big voxels on it, and of course, different types of things that were there mix up, and this is called partial voluming. I'm just defining it here to see, because I mean, you might imagine that if you record like 1 millimeter anatomical images, maybe your like white matter and CSF will be particularly partial volumed, right? You might have 50-50, then it becomes very hard to say, is it actually like a white matter tissue, CSF tissue? Okay, this partial voluming concept. And the other one that comes through my personal experience with people working on segmentations is the data precision. Like, be aware of your data precision. Your images come from the scanner, DICOM. You convert them to Nifty, whatever. And often you have this weird unsigned integer 12 range, actually. That's why I put it here. Some of you might recognize this number who uses Siemens scanners. That's because Siemens uses unsigned integer part of an unsigned integer 16 like a precision system. But the thing is, you would intuitively agree that, well, if I just take this like values, let's say my darkest voxel in the brain is 0 and my brightest voxel in the brain is 495, and I just through some pre-processing steps project it into 3 bits, that would be really nonsensical, right? I am losing information. And how can we think of it? So I've elaborated a bit more. And not only it's about the data precision that you have in your voxels in your computer, but also at the end, this is an issue about the display. Because even though we can have 12 bits, 16 bits, 32 bits, like all these numbers, our displays are usually limited to 8 bits for the grayscale range. So that even if you have the numbers there and the information there, the way you see it is limited. And this results in some actually also like quite famous professors claiming that, oh yeah, all you need for the anatomical MRI imaging is just this 8 bits range. I don't understand. We need to decrease the size of our data, you know, compress it. No, that's what you see. You are getting fooled by what you see. Again, Plato's cave, like the numbers are there, information is there. You are just unable to see it at the same time. And the third one is to be aware of your eyeball precision, because as you lose sight over time, you might be mixing these numbers, even if you have a very nice screen that can really show you the subtle details between grayscales, you might be not seeing it, right? So like you need to be aware that what you see and what the numbers tell you can be very different. And once you lose precision in any of these three, you cannot regain it. So just practical examples, if you go through a free surfer segmentation pipeline, at the end, you will have a very processed anatomical image that is in the range of 0 to 150. And I'm just saying it in the perspective of the just users. And then people say, oh, like, but my gray matter is too thick or white matter is too thin, what should I do? And they send me this data, 0 to 150. Well, I cannot do anything in this data, right? Because you lost the information already. Give me the initial data that is probably at the 12 bits range that I can then think of some filtering and other stuff to like better pre-process your data. So this is why it is relevant, and Brainwatcher is a different range. But the point is the range is not enough, like especially when we are dealing with high resolution 70 data, doing division operations and so forth. So this is a bit similar to partial voluming, but over the number line. If you think partial voluming is bad, you should agree that this is bad as well, and you should be aware of it. Okay, so now let's come to noise, our biggest enemy. Or maybe friend. So let's define the concept of the noise for segmentation context. I would say that unwanted fluctuations in the signal can be considered as noise, right? Those grainy stuff that you see. Thermal noise, maybe. Unwanted signal would be noise as well, for my definition. For instance, is ghosted areas. This is signal, but it's in an unwanted place, right? Or you have an artery, you have a flow artifact, and that's the true signal. It's not in a way like a fluctuations of the signal, but it appears somewhere else due to your MRI physics and data acquisition, and that could be noise as well. And of course, no signal is noise as well, because you don't have any tissue to give you signal. So now I will walk through some toy examples to give you the basics or the principles behind constructing almost any like segmentation algorithm, or pre-processing mostly, I would say. So let's imagine a toy brain. Right? You see there are 3 types of brain tissues here: very dark, white matter, gray matter, and also some skull and eyeballs. In an ideal world, when we have infinitely sharp boundaries, if we measure this image and we don't have any partial voluming, nothing, we would just get 3 infinitely sharp responses in our intensity histogram. This is a histogram, by the way, although it doesn't look like it because the bins are so sharp and high. Well, why? Because there are only 3 values in this image, actually 4 because of the 0. It's the dark gray, white, and light gray. So now let's put partial voluming on top. This is just a very simple partial voluming example. I made it like blocky, right? Pixel art. So what's happening in my intensity histogram when I just look at the global statistics of this image? So each pixel here becomes positioned in a bin there. So look, ideal case, just partial voluming. So now they are all around. But is there really noise in this image? No, right? Or maybe yes, but it's like a particular type of noise. That's a partial voluming noise. But if you would have seen the intensity histogram, you would see, oh, there's lots of noise here, right? Now let's add bias field on top. So this is partial volume plus bias field. So look what's happening to our global descriptive statistics. Getting more smeared, maybe noise is increasing, you might say. So now let's add thermal noise on top. We ended up having nothing, basically. And the funny thing is, as humans, right? This is so natural to recognize for us. Like, none of you will fail segmenting the gray matter of this image. But all of you will fail developing an algorithm that tries to extract like a perfect segmentation just based on the global statistics, right? So there is something there. Like, we can do so easily and naturally, but when you look at the global statistics of it, like, you make it quantitative, right? You make it, oh, I play with the numbers, it's automatic. Becomes really hard. And that requires, of course, development. So how to deal with this issue? Well, now I'm talking about pre-processing. Well, the first thing to do, as also Daniel mentioned, brain extraction. This is very important. Just don't care about the tissues that you will not analyze. Right? Get rid of the skull, get rid of the eyeballs. Easy, draw a circle there, all fine. So this got rid of this big noisy bump. Now try to do maybe denoising. You will hear about Nordic later, that's for a time domain signal. You might use other strategies like Gaussian smoothing and some other things I will talk about to get rid of this noise. Ah, look, you are regaining these peaks. And then you do large scale denoising, and this I mean you get rid of the bias field. And there you go, like you are actually recovering, right? So like pre-processing is really important, the right way of doing it. And that's where the tricky parts are, because you need to tweak some stuff, maybe find more robust algorithms and so forth. So now this might be a bit too abstract, therefore I'm going to give you more practical examples, or the ones that I did use personally in the past. So this is about a low spatial frequency noise removal, like bias field removal, intensity inhomogeneity correction. There are names for it. And I will just, as an example, like there is this little algorithm, and I just show it because maybe some of you might be interested in this type of stuff. And Saskia mentioned that it's very important to have multimodal images, right? Anatomical images. And this would be something that makes use of the multimodal information. So we have the surface coil. There's a hole in the middle of the brain, and then imagine trying to segment all the gray matter available in this image, right? It will be hell. Like to try to correct separately for each image and so forth. Whereas you can just do this. That's kind of an MP2Reg type of approach in a way. You do some stuff, you divide stuff, and basically you can correct for the bias field in all of the images. This is like a reoccurring theme. You acquire different anatomical contrast, and you test. Why does it go like? Thanks. So okay, this would be an example for a bias field correction, very multimodal. I don't think anyone uses it actually, or no one published it with it. But the most popular example would be like an algorithm called N4 that I found the most useful across different cases, partial brain coverage. So look at that, read this paper. It's available in multiple packages. So now let's have a look at the high spatial frequency noise removal examples. And here, there is really a gem of a filter and a very nice mathematical formalism behind it. That's called nonlinear anisotropic diffusion filter, or nonlinear anisotropic diffusion based smoothing, it's called. And like, please do have a look at this thing. And this thing is actually, for those of you who might have heard it, it's called Perona-Malik filter, but that's the wrong version. Because in 2005, I believe, or 2000, there was a German guy who wrote a PhD thesis about this thing, and there he like gives you the full mathematical formalism behind truly implementing a nonlinear anisotropic diffusion filter. And basically what it does is the following. Look, before, after, before, after. And maybe this is not so clear on the projector, but you can see the slides later. So if you have a single contrast, not multimodal or time domain data, and you just need to live with it and there is noise, And there could be like reasons for it. Maybe you try to do TMS, MRI, EEG at the same time. It did happen in Maastricht, and they couldn't get better than these pictures basically. And then we had to do something, to get rid of the noise and start segmenting. And this was our savior, nonlinear anisotropic diffusion filter over everything else. Other alternatives are just averaging, collect more data, average them together, spend time to fix your issue, or do Gaussian smoothing, and that would be actually a linear isotropic filter in this definition. But that, of course, distorts your tissue boundaries. So just take a note and maybe have a look. I'm going to now talk about augmentation. And this is a part I don't think we are really discussing so explicitly in the segmentation research domain. But although maybe one might say MP2Reg is an example of augmentation because they have in version 1, in version 2, they made something with it and give you a better image in certain ways. But what I find the most useful and the cheapest thing to do is actually computing something called a gradient magnitude of the image, or the first spatial derivative. There are again different names for it. What it is basically, imagine that you have a single T1 weighted image. You have nothing else, you cannot record more data. How can you make more use of it? Well, you can compute what's the one voxel's left side, right side, up, down, front, back. All these subtraction numbers, some call it gradient, others call it first spatial derivative, others call it different names. But basically that at the end gives you a vector field. And that vector field, you can compute the magnitude of it and turn it into a scalar field. And that basically, conceptually, what it does is that it gives you an image that highlights the edges in your image. That's as simple as that. It's not edge detection. That would be a step that leads you towards edge detection. It just highlights, it's like a scalar image, right? And it is sitting there for free. Compute it and use it in combination with your segmentations and when you do quality control, because your eyes might fool you, but the numbers will not, right? And this goes back to the number precision command. Like what you see on a grayscale image is limited. But if you compute the first spatial derivative of it and look at the magnitude of the numbers, that will give you another grayscale image. Now you are kind of actually comprehending a number regime on your computer screen that can only be unsigned integer rate precision, but you are understanding more and you can do further deeper quality control. We recently did implement in Laney a program called LN2 GRAMAG, so gradient magnitude. But also this is so in a way very easy to compute. Use whatever, MATLAB, Python, whatever you want. And many big software segmentation packages actually do make use of such quantities. It's not my invention. I'm just saying that compute it and look at it in combination with your intensity image when you do quality control. Okay, another important part, local diffusion. So again, this goes back to this nonlinear anisotropic diffusion filter. Look at the image on the left. You see that there's an iteration that is counting, and as the iteration counts, the image becomes smoother. You get rid of this thermal noise, this TV noise, right? And it looks kind of natural. So this, it looks cool. But this whole thinking is so powerful, and I'm almost decided to maybe write specifically about it, but I'm also not sure. Because you can tweak it in so many ways, but in ways that are very meaningful, and you can reason easily in space. Not just having a software and trying 10 different parameters and see what it works. That's a technician type of knowledge, right? I'm talking about really, anyway, this is side point. For instance, one example that I did use and we did publish from Maastricht is that we had some data from 1994. T1 weighted images, postmortem, all the tissue contrasts are messed up. It's hell to segment, right? And no one could segment it and create surface layers actually for 20 years. However, what did help us was to use this filter, but drive it in such a way that we are now enhancing the sulcus by exploiting the local gradients. This might be a bit abstract. I don't have too much time to really make you understand in detail. But basically what you can do is that you can make this filter in such a way that it only enhances the sulcus while keeping the other edges the same. For instance, here you can see that this vaguely dark thing becomes sharply dark. And this can be something to, it sits in your single contrast data, right? This information. And this is part of the thing that you see when you browse and reason in space, but you cannot really tell computer how to do. Like, yeah, there's like a sulcus there, you know, I see it when I go through a few slices. But how can I make it like come through numerically? This algorithm goes to that. And just some fun examples, I'm approaching towards the end. Look at before and after. Do you see a difference? So this is a data, 100 micron isotropic big brain data set. It's a histology, not even MRI. And you see all this junk there, all these like noise and all these like little residuals of the arteries, penetrating arteries that stay in your histology images. And if you are going to do laminar analysis, that you want to see the layers, it's not fMRI, but you still want to maybe see the layers. Well, those guys are disturbing you. They are like putting fluctuations in your laminar signal. What you can do is that you can use this nonlinear anisotropic filter again in a certain way to basically kill off this dotted noise and the tubular noise and keep the surfaces there. And look, now we can directly see the layers there, and of course, plot histograms and line plots and whatnot. This will be much more easy. And I would like to also say, actually, this was an idea that came to my mind when I was reading Blazayevska's work. And they do use the surfaces, and this algorithm doesn't use surfaces, so it in a way doesn't even require you to do segmentation. This is like almost a pre-process step because it's like a voxel-wise thing. But if you like the idea, do have a look at this paper as well, and do have a look at their pancake filters, because that's a similar idea. And just an exotic use case, I'm throwing this there in case maybe it rings some bells to someone. This is just some exotic mangabe, gray-cheeked mangabe brain. It's a non-human primate. And this was a dead brain, a brain sitting in a jar for years, and someone scanned it. They wanted to segment it, but there's an issue because all the white matter is plagued with these bubbles, right? It's deteriorated. What to do? They cannot just run free surface. This is like such a hard issue because you can also not like high pass or low pass or band pass filter. You are like, this is an issue that you cannot solve in the frequency domain because you are talking about the high frequency components, but also you talk about their geometry. You want to get rid of those bubbles, right? And there, the nonlinear anisotropic diffusion filter again comes into play to make it like you derive this from your data, you augment your data, and that makes your future segmentations easier. And here, a bit of a fringe thing, actually. So we did talk about multiple contrasts. So this is a T1 weighted image. This is a T2 star weighted image. And for instance, in the T1 weighted image, you see this sinus there, longitudinal sinus. Hopefully you do see, those of you who do visual neuroimaging. But there, it's gone in the T2 star weighted image. Let's say 15 milliseconds or 20 milliseconds. So if you are like if you cannot recognize the longitudinal sinus, let's say you just cannot do it, you know, you cannot recognize it anatomically, just record the T2 star weighted image because that will be just gone there. And by contrasting these two images, you will immediately tell that, actually my gray matter there is maybe too thick. It's going to the sinus, and let me put it back, you know? And as like a generalization thought of this idea would be actually creating true RGB color images from our multiple contrasts. So this can be a discussion in itself. I will just give you like a shallow part of it, but imagine that you record a T1 weighted image and the T2 star weighted image and the third one, whatever, like proton density weighted image. And assuming that there is meaningful information in three of them separately, they are not like overlapping with each other in terms of information content, what you can do is simply create a RGB image out of it. Like you put T1 weighted to your R channel, T2 star weighted to your green channel, proton density weighted to your blue channel. And then exploit your computer screens further, because now in this 8-bit resolution, when you use the RGB space, you can see many more details. So you are now actually like going beyond grayscale, right? Exploiting your screen to its like potential. And actually there, maybe you might realize that, like if I put the T2 star in the green channel and in this specific combination, there are some details there, of course, but everything that looks green is sinus. This helps me to understand where the sinuses are. Everything that looks like purplish, reddish is white matter. Everything that looks really purple is artery. Like maybe this might be a way to kind of understand the information content in your multi-contrast images. This is for those of you who do like multiple contrasts. So now at the end, let's come to the manual work part. Let's assume that you did all these things, right? You did all these things, you pre-process your data to its maximum, you cannot squeeze more signal out of your data. And yet it still doesn't work. The gray matter is not there. And going back to Renzo's talk, because I liked it very much, you saw your crappy image in the scanner, right? You know that if you tweak the bandwidth a little bit, you will fix it. Yet you might say that, oh, but I care about the taxpayer money and they want me to do exactly the same thing for some reason and not change the numbers, just like, I don't know, like be a robot, you know, just presses a button and make the computer do it. Therefore, I'm not going to fix it. I'm going to leave it crappy, right? And then 5 subjects out of 10 will be crappy, then you need to deal with it. So this is a similar thinking, like you did everything, it's not getting there. You might spend your next 6 months tweaking thousands of parameters, going around asking to the developers and struggling, or you just sit down, spend 2 or 3 hours, maximum, let's say you spend 8 hours one day. You know, you meticulously go through your data, you fix stuff, then you are done. So, okay, which one is more efficient for the taxpayer? That's my question. Okay, now let's talk about the manual segmentation, how to do it. Very shortly, actually, I will not go into too much detail. They are boring, they are laborious, they are painful, they are all true. I'm not going to tell you differently. But they are not good excuses by themselves. Yes, they are hard. Yes, getting good layer fMRI data is hard and you have to deal with it. That's the truth, you know. At least now, maybe in 10 years, we will have like some standards committee that is like everything is fine. We just plug and play, collect data, segment it, get the layers. But this is not the place now. We need high precision and accuracy. Okay, so here, and this is my only slide about manual segmentation. I will not talk about like how to twist your wrist or anything. Good reasons for not doing it. There are actually some good reasons for not doing manual corrections. And these are the same for also not changing your scanner parameters. If you do not know about brain anatomy, don't touch it. If you don't know about MRI physics, if you don't know what the bandwidth changes, maybe don't touch it. Ask to the expert. You know, that's the case, maybe you should not tweak around too much. Also what Saskia was saying, like if you don't know how these parameters, the MP2 range changes stuff, maybe don't touch it, leave it, right? That's a good reason. And actually might be funny and sad at the same time, if you literally spent your wrists and elbows doing manual segmentations, also don't do it. Because that's like it can cause a medical condition, like going there, fixing stuff manually. This is a lot of fine motor work, right? And this can damage your nerves. So maybe then don't do it. Bad reasons for not doing manual segmentation. I think we discussed some of them. And like this is a funny one that I encountered the most common. Oh, I don't do it because I don't have a student assistant to do it for me. And this to me is such a bad idea. Like you yourself want to avoid it and you want to hire like an undergrad, poor undergrad, make her or him sit in a room, do manual corrections that he or she maybe doesn't know about the brain anatomy and MRI contrast yet. However, some people do this and they write, oh, we did manual quality control checks and segmentations. No, you didn't do it. You just pretend that you did it, right? There was no expert involved in most cases. And then another reason, any manual work is not reproducible. Yeah, tell this to Kahal, right? Tell Kahal that you did manual work, you looked at your microscope, you draw stuff, I cannot reproduce it, therefore you are wrong. And then maybe wait for 20 years and see who is wrong. Any manual work is subjective. That's the other part that I find really strange. Like, what do you think computers are doing? Like, computer is not some God-given machine that knows the truth and like executes on it by itself. Like, these programs are written by people. You know, they inherit the beliefs and assumptions of the developers. They believe in stuff. They have biases. They have thoughts, comments, opinions, and they put them in an algorithm, and it becomes automatic. Yes. And good that it becomes automatic, so that person like multiplies himself or herself, right? But it's not subjective. Like they like sorry, it's not objective. It's just automatic. It's just you are replicating someone's subjective decisions. So that's a good bad reason for not doing manual corrections. For more details, you can check my YouTube channel where I go into more in depth about tips like, oh, maybe don't use a mouse, use a drawing tablet. You know, this is much more efficient. Some softwares maybe use really snappy ones that are very fast to interact and so forth. For that, I found that it's more useful for people to explore it by themselves, like in their own time, go through it. And I would like to offer you that if you are in a case that you really cannot resolve, reach me out. And if you agree for me to make a YouTube video out of it, I'm going to show you how to segment your data, whatever your data is. So one final word about quality control. I'm in time. Okay, so when let's say that you are fed up with this manual work, it doesn't work, and you start reading the literature. Right? Maybe you should have done it at the beginning, but fine. Then you start encountering these IEEE publications, you know, they say, oh, we used AI, this and that. It gives us a dice coefficient of like 0.1% higher than the previous industry standard method. We won. Well, be very careful about those papers because metrics are just like numbers that compress the result into a single number, like a p-value. And this dice coefficient is almost like a plague in the field, and especially important for us who are trying to do high resolution and precision layer fMRI, where we care about the borders of things. Because, like for instance, in the following example, you have the tissue star, right? And you run two algorithms. One of you give you a circle, a ball. The other one give you another star, but a bit like rotated. But my question is, which one of this is closer to the real tissue that you wanted to measure and segment? Well, according to dice coefficient, the performance is exactly the same. It would tell no difference between these two algorithms. Whereas I think just by looking, you would say that, hey, like this looks like a star. I just need to rotate it a little bit, right? And therefore, I would say that try to see papers with more than dice coefficient. And the one most useful metric that you should look for is the average Hausdorff distance. That measures the distance, average distance between boundaries, and that it doesn't really concern itself with the overlap of boxes. If you are interested in this, please do read the following paper because they really write like all about it, and they really give you a very good guidance of how to evaluate people quantifying their segmentations. So, okay, my penultimate slide, I think. So this is just a checklist for those of you who like checklists. Some summary points. Check for geometric anomalies in your segmentation. You should not have a place in the occipital on the calcarean sulcus that has 0 cortical thickness. I mean, I saw this, right? I saw actually people sending me data with no gray matter. White matter was becoming immediately CSF in many regions in the calcarean sulcus. And they were asking why Laney doesn't compute any layers, right? Well, Laney does work actually. So these are geometric anomalies. Of course, look for the gyrus that are like kissing each other and there is no hole in the middle, because that's a geometric anomaly, right? Hopefully you get the point. Check the sinuses, especially visual neuroimaging people know about the longitudinal sinus and the transversal sinus. Also auditory people look at the arteries there. Like study the macroscopic arteries and veins of the brain. This will really benefit you. Then check the anomalies within the cortical thickness. This can be like a shorthand way of checking if your segmentation algorithm give you too thin gray matter, too thick gray matter. Maybe in some area in calcarean sulcus, let's say, somehow you ended up having more than 5 millimeter cortical thickness, right? This would be a very easy way to tell, oh, something went wrong. Look at the T2 star weighted histograms. Again, look at the dark spots in your images. Look at the T1 weighted, see there are no like very bright ones and so forth. There are some papers who actually does these things. And of course, if you do have flattening, and I think Anna will talk about it tomorrow, have a look at your anatomy as well. Don't just look at your fMRI beta like values or T values or activity or whatever. Plot your anatomy there, because they will tell you if there was a weird like anomaly in your flattened brain. Then you can very easily spot, oh, there was actually a big vein here, artery there, and so forth. And with that, I would like to thank you for listening. You can find my YouTube channels there with lots of issues. You can reach Renzo and I using Laney issues page. We really prefer this because then you state your problem publicly and others can just see your problem and your like our answer to it, and we don't need to write emails to each of you. And I offer you a hand and a challenge. Let's collect all the edge cases and make a very tough segmentation benchmark library so that whoever claims to have the next like most general segmentation algorithm, we just pass it through all these edge cases and see if it survives all of them. I think that would be like a really future-looking way of finding the most general segmentation algorithm that works as us humans. That's like just tweak for gray matter segmentation. And just an acknowledgement for Kendrick K and Eileen Coopers, because I did present this lecture to them and they really helped me a lot in terms of like how I should highlight some points and how I should make more useful. So you should, I just thank them. That's it.